All right, so let's get going here. First of all, topic enabling. Right, this is a touchy one for parents. This is a touchy one for a lot of people in any kind of relationship. And that question is like spot on. People say, "Am I enabling?" And how do I know the balance and the difference? Well, I want to make a point right from the beginning here. Uh, you cannot help but to enable at times in a relationship, especially with your child. And let me explain this because you've done it. You have been in an enabling position, and so have I, and so has every parent, because your children are dependent upon you early in their life. They are dependent in the very beginning for everything. They would not live, they would not survive, they would not even thrive beyond that if they weren't dependent upon you. Right? And so this process right from birth begins where your child is able to do things for themselves, but also they're going to face struggle. And a lot of that is hand in hand. I mean, you can't learn and grow without struggle. And this might seem overly simplified, but think about when your little kiddo was learning to walk, right? How many times did they fall and bang their head and their knees and right? You had to let them do that. You had to let them figure it out, and it was a struggle. But that's the kind of struggle that every parent understands, um, and yeah, and that makes sense. But as they get older, it's a little harder to define. When do you let them struggle? When do you step in? And here's the thing, uh, there are going to be plenty of times where you are stepping in as a parent and you're doing something for your child that they can do for themselves. You are removing struggle from their life that they need to face. It's going to happen. It's impossible to avoid that because sometimes they surprise you. You know, one minute they can't do it, the next minute they can do it. You know, they've never experienced something like this, and will they be able to handle it? And then they're able to handle it. So sometimes they surprise us, and sometimes we it takes a while to realize to have the awareness of, you know what, I'm doing something for my kid that they need to be doing for themselves. They need to face this struggle, and I don't need to move it away from them. So it's going to happen, right? And I try to say that in the beginning because I want to disarm the shame around when parents find themselves in enabling positions. Every parent has been in that enabling position. We just want to educate ourselves. We want to understand when it's happening and how to pull out of it. And here's the piece that I'm going to touch on. A lot of why we get stuck in those enabling positions is because of us as parents. It's because of our fears. And that's why I want to talk about that today and address just kind of how that works. And I'm just checking that we're live and everything's working. And it looks like it is. So let's get into just the basic understanding of enabling, right? And gosh, I had actually Googled it a little bit before just to see definitions and what other people, how they describe enabling. And it was almost overwhelming, all the different things that are out there about enabling. But you can basically think of it as moments when we're shielding someone, in this case, our children, from natural consequences, right? And when we enable, it keeps them from growing, right? And there's a lot of different ways that plays out. So let's just dig into it, right? And there's actually, from a psychological therapy perspective, we break these into a lot of different categories, but I wanted just to put it into three. And one is a type of emotionally enabling that happens. And it's basically where we're trying to protect our children from the experience of big emotions, right? We don't want them to be under too much distress. So we do things like uh, soften the blow. Maybe we walk around on eggshells when we're around them because we don't want to do anything that's going to upset them. or as soon as they are experience some anxiety, maybe we're swooping in to soothe that, and all these things sound good. This is why enabling is so difficult. It's such a tricky thing because many times the behaviors that we're doing come out of a place of kindness. They come out of a place of trying to help. But what we're doing is we're removing a natural process of struggle and learning from our children. And the longer that goes on, and the more people in their lives, and the more systems even that do that, the more stuck they're likely to become. So the emotional enabling is one way, where we're basically, I just want to remove all the discomfort, right? Whatever could be troubling them, I want to remove it. And in the later stages, what that looks like is I don't want to blow up. I don't want an argument. I don't want maybe even a violent type of situation. And it's like as parents, we take responsibility for the other person's emotions, right? And that's another way to know that things are out of balance when you're taking responsibility, when you're doing all the work, and you don't feel the other person is taking responsibility and they're investing any work. So, when the emotional enabling, they basically this idea, this relational dynamic is that you are going to keep me comfortable, right? You, my parent, and I don't have to worry about that struggle. I don't have to do hard things. I don't have to think about hard things. I don't have to move forward because you're going to keep me comfortable. That's the message that they have. Another enabling category that people talk about all the time is financially, right? Financially enabling. And that's pretty straightforward, right? That's where you're paying for their rent, you're paying for their car insurance, you're paying for their phone bills, you're covering for consequences. Maybe you're paying for their tickets, you're funding their lifestyle because you don't want them to feel like they are deprived of something, and covering things for them. Again, there's a time in their life when that was appropriate, right? They couldn't pay for those things. They couldn't do that stuff. But there was a time when they could. There was a time when they needed to feel the heat of finances. And so you don't want them to get that message that I don't have to do anything yet because it's going to be taken care of, right? I don't have to move yet. I don't have to start paying for this yet. I don't have to start working yet. That's the message that starts to develop when there's the financial enabling. The other one is this is kind of a catch-all. It's kind of a crisis enabling, and I'll explain this to you a little more because it's basically an extreme form of that emotional enabling. Like whenever they're in a crisis, I'm going to drop everything and I don't want them to get upset, or I'm going to instantly respond whenever they're in a panic. And any emergency they're creating, I'm going to resolve that. So they basically this message of if I panic, you're going to rescue me. But I want to dig into this one a little bit more. Because it creates this dynamic where a child, your even adult child, has established this relationship that is around being rescued, right? And sometimes I was actually observing and talking with a mom recently who was doing this with young children, right? I could see the beginning of it, right? It was like creating these crises where it was, are you okay, little kid? Or, that was really mean, or that shouldn't have happened to you. You should be really upset. And it was kind of like leading this child to think that there was a bigger problem going on than there really was. Why does a parent do that? Well, it's fulfilling their own needs, right? They really do care about their kid and don't want them to struggle, but it also puts them in a position of being a rescuer. So they can rescue, they can swoop in and solve all those problems. And that feels good to the parent, and it makes the life seemingly easier for the child as they grow. But this other thing happens, and I see this more on the therapy side. You have kids who they know that that's what brings value and connection with their parents, right? They see how much the parents love rescuing, how important that is. And so it's a way of being connected with that parent. So not only do they allow it, a lot of times you see kids, they start to create their own crisis when there doesn't need to be a crisis, right? They're creating a situation where a parent comes in and rescues them, and that feels very connecting and loving, and they feel like they're doing a good job. And so that is a dynamic that I see very often. But it all fits under this bigger umbrella of uh, shielding our kids from natural consequences and the struggle that comes with those things. And yeah, so let's put a period on that. And let's start talking about fears, right? Because a lot of times I find that parents have a fairly good idea that things are out of balance. I mean, sometimes they know, like, I should not be doing this for my kid. I should be holding a tougher line. I should not be paying for this. I need to let them struggle, but I just can't, right? And that's where I want to talk to us tonight about identifying some areas. And I put it into three. There's certainly more than this, but just, maybe you can think about, when do you fall into these categories? And I would say all of us slant as parents to one or all of these categories. It's more about our awareness, right? I'm going to say that again. Our awareness that, hey, things are out of balance. This is a struggle that I don't need to take, or I need to take a different approach. I don't need to take it away from my kid. This is something that they can do for themselves, and we're going to have to go through a struggle. So one of them is a fear of their child failing, right? This is actually a big one. I see parents really get stuck because they don't want to see their kid fail. Who wants to see their kid fail, right? So they swoop in, and early age, they're talking to the teachers and they're doing these things, and that maybe was a little too soon, maybe it was a little too quick, maybe not, right? It's more about the repetition. Big point, big point I'm going to make right here. Any one moment is rarely a make it or break it, short of something truly hugely traumatic, right? There's a time where you go too far and you do something that for your kid that they should have handled themselves. It happens, right? It's more about the consistent pattern, the consistent repetition of that we want to avoid. Um, but yeah, the parents who say, well, I don't want them to fail, right? If they lose a job, it'll destroy their self-esteem. If if they um, if they don't figure this friend situation out, right, they're never going to have friends again. If I let them take on this debt, they are going to struggle with debt for the rest of their life. And a lot of times as parents, we catastrophize, right? We're not thinking about even realistically. We're like, where's this going to go? They're going to be living in a van down by the river. No, they're not, right? But it's the fear of that that's, I just can't let this go. And on the extreme, especially when addiction is involved, um, I see a lot of parents really struggle with, what if they overdose, right? What if they're going to be homeless? What if they're going to, just perish out there in some way or another? And that fear is enough that parents say, no, I will not set a limit. I will not set a boundary because I'm afraid of them failing. I'm afraid of them getting hurt emotionally, physically, in any way. And that's one of the fears. Another fear is the fear of losing the relationship. Another big one. Hear this all the time, right? If I set a limit, he's going to shut me out. If I hold the line, then they're going to just be cold to me. They're not going to talk to me, and uh, and so it's why a lot of parents they'll set a boundary, but as soon as their child gets ticked off at them or gives them the cold shoulder, they cave in, right? The first sign of conflict, they cave in because they're so afraid of losing the relationship. And um, well, let me go over the last one, then I'm going to come back and comment on these because I can already tell what some of you are thinking because I've heard it so many times. The other one is the third fear is the fear of being a bad parent, right? And that's kind of a catch-all category where am I screwing up? Am I being too harsh? Am I being too cold? Um, but a lot of that category of fearing being a bad parent is when it's more about your past trauma. It's usually like a overcompensation for something that happened to you. My father was too distant and cold, and um, he never did anything nice for me, so I'm going to go out of my way to make sure they never feel that kind of thing. But when it becomes removing all discomfort, it's too much. So typically it's a fear of I don't want to be my parents. I don't want my kids to have my experience, which is a wonderful thing. All right, but then we get it out of balance because it becomes let's remove all the struggle. All right. So fear of your child failing, fear of losing the relationship. Those two categories in particular, uh, those are really strong because that is a reality, right? When you have not been setting limits, when you have not been setting boundaries, when you have been in rescuing mode and then you stop doing that, your kid's not going to like that. Any relationship, any relationship where there's unhealthy boundaries or non-existent boundaries, and then you start setting boundaries, healthy limits about what's okay, what's not okay, there will be resistance, right? Because people, it's kind of obvious, right? Like, why are you doing this? Now you're being mean. Now you're being cruel, right? They don't see it as healthy. They see it as a betrayal. They see it as sabotage, and especially when it's done super abruptly without explanation and the working through the conversations that I have been teaching you guys on how important these conversations are, which I made a video and it is pinned at the top of Facebook. So not now. After we're done, then you go watch that because that'll tell you about how to have those conversations. But yes, you might have a kid that's ticked off at you and moves out or doesn't talk to you in a while. That is a reality. They might get themselves in bad situations. We want to avoid that, but if that's a deal breaker for you, you're in a powerless position. And so a lot of what I do with parents and families is I help them see the middle ground. Because in all honesty, what I see is situation is really bad. Parents are so ticked off they can't handle it anymore. They've been burnt too many times, and then there is this explosion or reaction of boundaries and anger and emotion, and it doesn't help, right? It's not the right conversation. So struggle is a part of it. That's the point I'm trying to make. Struggle is a part of it. Your kids at any age and your adult children, they will need to struggle. And part of that struggle is because they're dependent on you to fix things and rescue them and clean up their messes. They're going to see you as the reason they're struggling. Isn't that kind of messed up? Right? Now that we explain it, you can understand it. But you're the reason, mom, dad, you're the reason that I'm struggling. It's not the fact that I've been sitting around doing nothing. It's not the fact that I've been numbing out and escaping with all these unhealthy coping mechanisms and addictions. It's not because of any of this stuff. It's because I expect other people to do this for me, for it to be bailed out. And so, yes, they will struggle, right? They're going to have to face things they never faced before. They're going to have to face feelings and emotions they've never faced before and situations and all of that. But that's the opportunity for you to love them and support them and possibly teach them. And it's where they can learn. I mean, from a therapist perspective, a lot of this is what I'm trying to do in a therapy session, right? I want to shake things up. When a family is stuck in an enabling pattern, nothing's going to move forward. So if I can get that to change, if we can create some struggle, it's not because I want to see people suffer. It's because that is the chance to actually help them work through the struggle, right? Let's talk about your emotions. Let's talk about how upset you are. Let's talk about the way you're thinking. Let's talk about the fact that you've never done this before. You've never had to learn this skill on your own. You've never had to push back against this addiction before. And that is, that's a, it's kind of like the golden moment, but it is so hard to do. So let's talk about turning this around a little bit, and then I'm going to go over some questions because I think those are good ways for us to learn. In general, when you're moving out of an enabling cycle that is fueled by your fears, you want to show your children the opposite of fear, right? You're not afraid of now, it doesn't mean you don't care, but you're not afraid that they might struggle, right? You're not afraid that they are going to be angry at you. You are not afraid that things are all going to fall apart, right? It's like this calm confidence that you want to develop, that you want to be able to share with them of no, I'm not going to live in fear anymore. And that leads to these statements, right, where we say, I'm here for you, but I'm not fixing this, right? And in our minds, we're like, you can be ticked off at me, you can be upset, but I'm not going to help you if I fix this. You need to fix this. So I'm here for you. I'll talk it out. I'll give you ideas, right? But I'm not fixing this situation for you. Or I'm not cutting you off. Everyone's like, when do we cut them off completely? Usually not, right? I mean, there are some situations, but it's more you're saying, look, I'm not going to completely cut you off, but I'm also not going to fund this, right? There's a plan. You've got to start paying for this, at this date, at this time, and this is why. Let's talk about what that's like for you. Let's talk about how to make that happen, right? It's statements like, I won't argue with you. Uh, you let me know what you want to decide or what you're going to do, right? I'm not going to argue this with you. This is your choice. This is your life. You go figure it out. I'm here for you, right? I'm here to support. I'll have a loving, supportive conversation, but I'm not going to argue about it. And setting clear expectations and limits. And so it's getting to a place where you face your own fears, and that's where you need to do what you need to do, right? Many times, uh, kind of the second part in working with a family, after I get a family to parents to stop being in an enabling position with their adult children, is then I have some time to talk with the parents. I'm like, all right, let's talk about what this is like for you. For the first time, you not only set a limit, but you have followed it through like you never have followed it through before. And your kid's freaking out and they're spitting venom at you and you're worried about this. What are you doing about that fear? And so uh, that's using a therapist. That's an option for you. Reach out, talk to someone, and say, I need to work on my fears about my child that's leading to enabling, right? I need to know how to be confident that I'm doing the right thing. And then you go talk to other people, especially if you know someone who's been through it or has an understanding of these situations. You gotta be careful because, um, gosh, this is a tricky moment. So I don't even know exactly how to say it, but um, I I think a lot of parents reach out to their parent friends, and we tend to hang out with people who have a similar mindset. So when you're in a position where you're realizing that I need to change my ways, I'm too fear based and it's leading to enabling, and I need to uh, hold a tough line, and my kid's going to be suffering. I'm going to see them struggle. Maybe I shouldn't use suffer, but they're going to struggle, right? Or suffer for a little while. And then you go talk to one of your friends. Uh, I hear that many times where they're like, "Why are you letting your child hurt so much? Why are you? They're so upset. I couldn't do that. I don't think you should do that." So you need to be cautious with who you're reaching out to about your fears. And like I said, if you could talk to someone that's maybe in more of a professional role or even a ministry role, people helped other people, right? They know what they're talking about, and then other resources. That's why I have this group, right? It's why we're doing this is uh, to have a sounding board to understand what is a little bit what's more healthy and how to move in that direction. No, take care of yourself. It's crucial. I might be over talking this, but uh, those are just those moments where, honestly, earlier in my career, used to frustrate me a lot more. Right? I talk with a parent and we come up with a plan. And all right, here's where the limit is. This is your kid's going to struggle. They're going to be upset about this, but you're doing the right thing, and we're all in agreement. And then the next time I see them, they totally caved on everything, and I was like, "How could you do that?" Right? But I wasn't fully accounting for the power of that fear, right? That fear of, I don't want to be a bad parent. I don't want my kid to fail and to experience something horrible. I don't want to be responsible for that in that situation. And so, they give in. So I realize support, support, support. We need a lot of it when we're setting those boundaries. Okay, so I'm going to read two questions that came in, and I'll see if I can find some reason. I've noticed I've had people leave a question, and I don't. It doesn't pop up till after I end the live. So I don't know. Maybe we can do that this time. Two questions. First one: we're exhausted. Our 25-year-old son has been living at home for almost 3 years now. Every time we try to give him responsibilities or set expectations, he gets overwhelmed, shuts down, and then we feel guilty and back off. Let's just stop right there. I think I just said that, right? It's just what I was talking about. The fear, right? We feel guilty. We're doing something wrong. We're doing something harsh. We're screwing up. We're being bad parents. And what did they do? They back off, right? And I get that, right? No shame there, but it's the power of that fear. So then they say, we paid his bills, we covered his mistakes, and tried to keep the peace because we're afraid of pushing him away or triggering a meltdown. But nothing is changing. They're spelling it out right there. To me, but I can already tell this parent in the way they're saying this, they know that it's what's happening inside of them that is so much more of this. And a lot of times it's like parents saying, "Hey, Jonathan, what's the easy way to do this?" There's better ways to do it, absolutely, right? But easy? No. This is going to be a struggle for everyone, parents included, right? And so uh, there's uh, there's got to be a pushing through. No pain, no gain, right? And cliche, and I know that's often minimizing, but the principle is sound. All right. They said, but nothing is changing. If anything, he's becoming more dependent. How do we know when we're supporting him and when we're actually enabling him to stay stuck? Okay. Um, it's really in the limits and the boundaries. What I would say specifically to this person is, you've already set the limits. You've already identified things that he needs to be doing for himself. And when you're not following through, when what by whatever means he is not having to follow through on his part, that's enabling, right? And obviously he's learned that pattern of becoming emotionally dysregulated, and anger and meltdowns and shutdowns, right? Projecting that on the parents. Parents, this is your fault. This is your problem. You need to fix my mood by backing off. You need to fix this situation by covering these things, right? It's all out of balance. So that is enabling, right? When you don't follow through, that's the enabling. Um, and so support is not uh, fixing things, right? It's not removing the consequences and the limits and the boundaries. Support is empathy. Like, hey, son, I know this is hard. I know you're not happy with how this thing's going. I know you're anxious. I know you're scared. let's talk about it. You still need to do this. Maybe we can break it into smaller steps for you. Maybe we can get another resource to help, right? But it's got to happen. It's going to happen, right? And that's the shift in the balance. All right. Second question. How to convince. Oh, and this one actually just came in. So I'm going to break it piece by piece. This was one of our group members that posted. You probably saw it online. So I'm going to break this one down. How to convince my adult child that he has mental health issues that need to be addressed. First of all, you don't convince anyone of anything, right? That can't be your goal. That is unattainable, right? You cannot control someone else's mind. So when your goal is to convince someone of something, you're out of control, right? You're already in a losing position. And it puts probably your son, in this case, in a great position to be passive aggressive, right? I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of agreeing that I have a mental health issue, that I have struggles. I'm not going to do that, right? This is all you. This is all you, mom and dad. Everyone's crazy. There's nothing wrong here. That's they're in that position. So the goal is not to convince them. Yes, we want them to accept that and get to a place, but that cannot be your goal. That's his to figure out. She goes on to say, or he, I'm not sure if it was a he or she, said, I believe he has depression, anxiety, and anger. He was diagnosed ADHD as a child and was put on medication until around 15. Then he wanted to stop medication. Very common, right? I'm struggling. I need medication. I take medication. I'm not struggling. It's working. I don't need it anymore, right? It's like, I'm feeling fine. Why do I need this medication? So that's a common pattern. Or also the shame of medication or being in therapy. And at 15, the level of self-consciousness of everyone's looking at me and yeah, is really strong. So it doesn't surprise me that a 15-year-old wanted to stop medication. All right, question. Could mental health issues come before drug addiction, after drug addiction, or both? Um, it's in the present moment, it's better to see it all as one condition, right? An addiction is a mental health crisis, disorder, if you will. And so is the anxiety and depression, and they go hand in hand, right? The more someone's using substances, the less to numb out, the less they are developing the skills they need to have better mental health. So as they try to stop using, they have this backlog of anxiety and depression and undealt with issues and situations, and so it can appear that they have a much more severe mental health issue, but in reality they're emotionally, mentally immature. They haven't had to deal with this stuff, and all the consequences come flooding back. I made a good video about this. I don't know if I, excuse me, if I posted it in the group, but it's definitely on my YouTube channel, and I think it's on the main Facebook page, Living with Addiction. But I just talk about how hard it is to stop an addiction and what someone goes through as they're trying to change. Um, but yeah, so he could have initially, he had that anxiety and ADHD. Kids with ADHD also tend to struggle with self-esteem. Everything's harder, right? It's harder to pay attention. It's harder um, to fit in. It's harder. Everything is harder, and they tend to really struggle with self-esteem and self-image, and they're also tend to be a little bit more mature because they don't catch on to things as quickly. Takes them longer to learn because they're so distracted, and so you have a lot of um, self-esteem, insecurities, and anxieties, and things like that that are really common with kids with ADHD. So the question continues. It says, how could we pinpoint trauma in his past, if there was any? Uh, it's Probably, well, there could have been a big trauma, right? But my guess is if you can't pinpoint something major right now, and and that is something that we tend to look for, as even as parents, when a kid's struggling, is like, all right, maybe there was like some big trauma we didn't know about that's explaining what's going on, and it could be that has happened. They've kept it secret. They have felt unsafe. That is possible. But my hunch is listening to your question is your son has probably experienced a lifetime of what we call small T traumas, right? They're not the big ones like PTSD situations or massive abuse or accidents or witnessing something that was so horrific, and feeling true danger and a loss of control, and but it's more of these little woundings that happen over and over, like with a kid with ADHD, right? They get teased over and over. They get feeling like they don't fit in. They get corrected more than the other kids in class. They might have had multiple people be yelling at them, peers that tell them to shut up, they're talking too much, they're too stupid, teachers who can't stand them anymore and roll their eyes every time they walk in the room. And it's those little things that add up that um, become very defeating for these kids. So there probably was a form of trauma, but not necessarily a giant event, but the accumulation of many moments. All right, and here is the last one or two things in this. It said he had drug addiction for many years. Hopefully, that means he's over that. Because of this, he has several felonies and consequences. Hmm. I see a little bit of positivity in that. But I could be reading it wrong, but it said he had drug addiction for many years, and because of that, he has felonies and consequences. Um, yeah, right. Those are natural consequences, and a lot of that's because of the addiction and things that he didn't deal with. Hopefully, he's past that, but sounds like he's still struggling. So here's the bigger thing that I would suggest to you. Um, you want to continue to keep supporting your son, to keep loving him, to be there for him, to tell him how much he means to you at whatever age he is, and how much you care about him. And you want him to be healthy, happy, confident, right? That's your desire for him. And you don't want to get into this problem seeking conversation. Like you have a mental health disorder, you have ADHD, you have anxiety, you have depression. No one really likes that approach, right? I would encourage you to come at it from the other way. We love you, son. We care about you. We want you to be happy, healthy, and confident, right? A sense of purpose and direction in your life. And we want you to do anything and everything that's going to help you in that journey to find that in your life. And that's where you might say, if you want to uh, seek a therapist, to talk about the difficult things you've been through, how hard it is to handle these consequences with these felonies, and maybe that's affected the job, and just whatever it is, encouraging him to do what he needs to do to take care of himself. And I don't know how old your son is, but maybe he's in a position where he would need some even financial support for something like therapy. I think that's a very loving thing to do. Of course, a therapist is going to say that, but when a family member or someone steps up and says, "Hey, we want to help you find, a therapist or counseling or some sort of, support," and don't make it about, he's all flawed and messed up, but more about the good life, like where he can go, what he can achieve. Imagine a life without anxiety. Imagine, or without debilitating anxiety, and where you're feeling confident and you have purpose and direction, and these things aren't holding you back anymore, right? That's what we want for you. So go get some support. Um, so it's a loving conversation.